Hey everybody, it's your friends, Brad and Dave.
And we're just dropping into your feed to tell you about a special offer this month.
Here's the special offer. Join us on Patreon at the $5 level and you'll get
an exclusive episode of Drunk Comic Lab.
It's a Patreon-only hour of us talking comics while suitably soused.
Oh, you will regret missing this. Brad is a delight.
And when you join, you'll also get an ebook of how to make webcomics.
That's right. This is our how-to book on web cartooning that's now gone through 4 successful printings at Image Comics.
And when you join us on Patreon, you'll also get an ebook of the Webcomics Handbook.
So now that's 2 ebooks you're getting. This one with over 200 pages of actionable advice and how-tos that you can apply to your cartooning today.
So that's the scoop. Join us before Thanksgiving,
November 28th.
And get 2 free ebooks plus the exclusive episode of Drunk Comic Lab.
Gang, you already know you love the show, and here is your chance to join us on Patreon and get 3 cool freebies.
And if you're already at the $5 level or higher, all you got to do is stick around. You'll get your reward on the 29th.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. So, Brad, I'm driving around Los Angeles yesterday, and, LA is a ridiculously overheated real estate market. It's like, 1-bedroom horse trough with extra hay, $4 million, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what happens in that kind of a weird real estate market is you get a lot of signs popping up on telephone poles and light poles and stuff. And so I got to tell you about this one sign yesterday that I saw because I was like, kind of undercutting the message here. So it's like, make tens of thousands. I need an assistant to train to flip houses with me. Amazing work. But all right, and you're like, oh, okay, that's a legit promo for something.
Sure.
But then, Brad, it's written in Sharpie on a high school poster board and taped to a telephone pole. And this is like the biggest undercutting of message I've ever seen. Like, make tens of thousands. Meanwhile, I bought this $1 Sharpie and a $1.50 poster board.
Make tens of thousands by not spending any money on office supplies.
Look, you too can be a millionaire by stealing staples from the office.
And please tell me that tens of thousands both had apostrophe S's. That'll just complete it.
Yeah. To answer your unspoken question, yes, 1,000 typos or rightos. I guess it's a righto since it's in Sharpie. But just, Brad, imagine that. That's like those, dating ads where like, huge stud, but it's like written poorly, so it's like huge stewed, STOOD, and you're like, yeah, you're kind of undercutting the message there,
Yeah, it seems legit to me.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, that is a lot like comics. So let's talk about this. Let's say, hey, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And making tens of thousands from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com
and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his real estate flipping friend, Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab.
So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We got a full week of questions that have come rolling in. Boy, hold on. I gotta pause to explain. I'm a little bit fuzzy in the head today because we've got a little sick one in the house. So I was up all night with him, and oh my God, Brad, I can't put 2 words together today. I'm like, nah.
We were doing a little pre-show, and I got a little. I got an indication that it's going to be fun listening to you try to think.
Was the big giveaway, Brad, that I couldn't say the word Geiger when I was like, just like Brad Groger style. Groger? Who's Groger?
Oh man! And now there is nothing worse than a sick kid. Was it like a fever or a stomach virus? Or what are we talking here? What are we cleaning up from?
Did you ever see the movie Poltergeist, Brad?
Yeah. Was there a lot of pea soup projectile type stuff?
Let's just say it wasn't the scene where they're moving into the house. Let's just say it wasn't that scene.
Oh boy!
Oof is right. Anyway, apologies ahead of time if I'm a little bit talking like your drunk uncle today. It's because I'm working on 2 hours of sleep, everybody. But
yeah.
But though, Brad, speaking of drunk uncles, I wanted to raise a point with you about George R.R. Martin, because I heard a really great interview with him.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a creeper of a weird dude, as you know, but he had a really good interview point on NPR this past week that I wanted to share with our ComicLab listeners, because I think it actually raises a really good point about how you write, how you begin a story, how you execute. And he had a delineation of 2 types of writers.
Mm-hmm.
You could either be a gardener or an architect. And now, without explaining anything, Brad, I think you could probably figure out what George was talking about there. Can you sense what the difference is between a gardener as a writer and an architect as a writer?
Well, it sounds like a gardener, without belaboring the metaphor, plants seeds and lets things grow in an organic way and follows it where it leads, and maybe trims it back here or there, but it kind of takes a more let's see where this is going approach. And an architect spends a lot of time planning, making up blueprints, doing measurements, doing whatever those guys do with the tripod. They look through the little binoculars on the tripod, that kind of stuff. And
those guys are making tens of thousands flipping houses. That's what they're doing, Brad.
Yeah, we should say you can make tens of thousands of dollars in webcomics, just not all at the same time.
That's great.
But I think it's a question between an organic creative process and a very orderly, planned out creative process. Would I be right?
Yeah, you're right. And I immediately he identified himself as a gardener.
Yeah.
Because they were in the context of talking about A Song of Ice and Fire. The interviewer was saying, there's a few threads that have yet to be carried through, and there's a few characters that, even though they were seeded into the story, were never really developed. And George was like, well, I see myself as a gardener. I like you said, I plant these seeds, I nurture things along. And I think, putting words in his mouth, I think what he's doing is he's saying, I trust future me to take the ball and move it up court,
Right.
So
right.
And I have to say, I identify with that as a process, because with Drive, I have planted a lot of seeds that, even though I don't have the holistic vision of how they're going to grow, what the full plant is going to be when it grows, I know that future Dave Gardner will keep cultivating that and will find a way to make it work. Like, I know we've talked about this before, I know the big arcs that I'm going to hit, I know the big major points I'm going to hit along the way, but I really like this metaphor of a gardener versus an architect, because I think, and granted, every writer finds something along the way, but if you look at like J.K. Rowling's notes, she's very copious in architecturally planning out the Harry Potter stories. Like, again, I'm sure she found things along the way, but she knew by really careful planning where she was going to go, what she was going to do, what they were going to say. And I find myself identifying more with that gardener metaphor.
Yeah,
that idea that you're going to need some form of conflict in XYZ, so you plant it. You don't know how you're going to resolve it. You don't know where you're going to take it, but you plant the idea. And I see it in you, too. Wouldn't you say you're a gardener as a storyteller?
Without a doubt. Completely. In other words, there's a bunch of... I keep, when I do my writing from sketchbook to sketchbook to sketchbook, I transplant pages from the old sketchbook into the new one, because there's so many things that gets carried over. And one of those is just a page full of hanging threads or seeds, if you will. In other words, it's like, okay, don't forget this person did this, and at some point it's got to be either explained or it's got to come to fruition. There's a bunch of stuff that some of them I have an idea of what it's going to be. Some of them I have no idea whatsoever. It's just that it seemed like a really good idea to plant something there at the time, and now I got to make sure I do something with it.
Yeah.
And what I invariably find out is later on, each one of those things has come in handy when all of a sudden I find that like I'm in a pinch, or I'm up against something. It's like, oh yeah, wait a minute. I planted this one idea that it's going to tie in perfectly here. And if you sprinkle enough of those throughout, you can kind of give yourself a get out of jail free card down the road, because it's like, oh yeah, this is going to connect up perfectly. You just have to be,
Right.
if you're going to do that, the other analogy isn't necessarily a gardener, it's a trapeze artist. And what's happening is you're leaving that one swing flying through the air, reaching towards that other guy on the swing. But to make the connection, you've got to make sure that you go back and review and make sure that you're not creating an inconsistency that you're going to have to go back and retcon.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from experience, I've done that enough too.
Yeah.
Gotten burned by it. And I have just enough readers that are meticulous enough that they catch it within the first 5 minutes of it going live on Patreon. So just be careful in that regard. But Dave, don't you think that's I don't know. Maybe it's because my brain isn't wired that way. Don't you think that's a better approach than the architecture approach?
Well, Brad, I'm glad you asked that because I actually think it depends on the type of story you are telling.
Yeah.
And so here's the difference, I think. If you are turning in, Brad, a completed project, a short story, a novel, a screenplay, a movie, I think that it will have benefited from you having been an architect. You planned out all the major points. You got all the arcs. You blocked it out based on acts, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You deliver the final product, and then the architect delivered. Whereas you and I are writing much longer form stories that are not yet a deliverable concrete unit. You know what I mean?
Yep.
They are a deliverable that's still open-ended. And so I think for that kind of story writing, you are more likely to benefit from being a gardener. Because I can't, if like Drive is going to take me when it's all said and done, like 15 years to have completed. And there's no way that Dave, 15 years on, was going to listen to all the story points and outlined architecture notes had I done it that way. You know what I mean? I just wouldn't have done it. I would have been like, no, I want to change this up. So it's better to do, for me anyway, to do it in the style of an architect, in a gardener. And frankly, Brad, to borrow a phrase from improv, what I'm doing is I'm gifting myself something.
Yeah.
I'm saying to future Dave, not only do I trust you, here is a gift. Take the ball, run with it. Make something out of this. Here's half a lump of Play-Doh. Make it into an ashtray. You know, that kind of thing.
Yes.
By the way, yes, I just described the quality of my writing as here's a lump of Play-Doh. Make it into an ashtray. That's
how nice. I can't wait to take up smoking. Well, now here's another thought. If while you were saying that, you made me think of this, and see if you agree. If you're having trouble writing, it might be useful to ask yourself, am I approaching this as a gardener? And if so, is my brain better suited to approach this as an architect? And vice versa. If you're reading into writing problems and you bang your head against the wall, it might be useful to say, oh, geez, I'm really taking this approach as a gardener and I'm much more of an architect, or I'm doing all this planning like an architect, and really my brain is much better suited to be a gardener.
That's exactly true. And it basically goes to the point of like, just know what you are, know how you work best.
Yeah.
But the main thing I wanted to bring up with this George R.R. Martin quote is that I find that metaphor is a helpful one to trying to describe, because, you know, so often the creative process is nebulous and it's like trying to catch quicksilver in your fingers. And so when somebody does get a metaphor that works, I'm like, aha, I'm holding on to that. And the metaphor of a gardener versus an architect is a really helpful one for the type of writer you are and the type of writer you want to be and the type of writer that you work best as.
Yes.
So that's why I wanted to share that one.
Well, and one last point before we move on. Remember that every gardener, even the most organic of gardeners, every once in a while has to build a trellis for those tomato plants to climb up. They've got to become an architect every once in a while. They've got to bring a little architecture in. They've got to build a fence around their garden so that the rabbits don't come across and eat the carrots. You know, you got to bring a little bit of architecture into your gardening. And at the same time, every good architect has to think a little bit about landscaping and green spaces and stuff like this. The best of architects have to allow themselves a little bit of organic moments as well. So I'm getting the slow clap from Los Angeles.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brad Geiger. Brad Geiger.
Yeah, in other words, don't get keyed into just one thing. Remember, even if you are the most gardener of gardener, take a little bit of time for that other side of your brain as well. You could do something good.
That's absolutely true. Yes, yeah. Perfect, Brad. Perfect summation on that one.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad I brought that through, because we have a question written in by one of our $5 backers, and I've been itching to get to it because it is a fantastic question, and it's a topic. We've had a lot of recurring topics on this show. This is a topic that we haven't hardly talked about at all, so I'm kind of eager to dig into it. You ready?
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
This comes in from Mike, and he says, "Dear Brad and Dave, love the show. Been listening to you both since the beginning of Webcomics Weekly. Glad to see you've each been making a go of it since then.
Making a go of it. I see you. I see the subtle jab.
See what he did there? My question is about online commissions. Do you actively seek out commission work? Do you have a set of rules to go by to establish what you'll do and for how much? What about including characters you don't own the rights to, such as Star Wars or Marvel characters? Thanks. So I ask you, Dave, tell me about your commissions."
Okay, so this is a great question. I've literally never answered this question before, so this is fun to do. So I do now do commissions based on Sam Logan and Jake Parker convinced me a couple years back at an Emerald City Comic Con, like, hey, why don't you start taking commissions? It's worth a few $1,000s a year. And they're fun to do. And I was always like, nah, I don't want to do commissions. I just want to do the things that I want to do. I was frankly, Brad, I was very fussy, I guess is the word, or I don't know. I was like, I just want to draw what I want to draw. That kind of thing.
No, I get that. I get that mindset, though.
Yeah, but it was a little bit closed-minded in the sense that, like, on some level, I needed to trust my readership that they might have fun ideas in the wheelhouse of things that I like to draw, you know? Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I opened up commissions, great fun. And then I started to get more of a systematic way of handling it. So now what I do, Brad, is I try to do commissions only in certain chunks of the year because it's kind of like email, Brad. If you check email once a day, it's really efficient and you're done in 20 minutes. Yeah. But if you constantly listen for the ding, 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 and you check every 10 minutes, that process not only breaks your train of thought, it takes you 40 minutes over the course of the day to do email. Yes. So what I try to do with commissions is I do them in specific chunks. Like I know that people are going to want to gift them around Christmas. So usually around that time of year, I will open up commissions. I know that they are big sellers in Kickstarters. So around that time of year, I will open up commissions. And the other time I do it is San Diego Comic-Con. Mm-hmm. It's a fun one for me personally to see someone open up the envelope for their ordered commissions. So I like to do them for San Diego. Yeah. So there's 3 or 4 times a year where I open it up. And what I do is I have 2 consistent forms that I use. One, a physical form. If someone's at a convention and they say, hey, do you do commissions? I can hand them a sheet. It literally is an ordering sheet that says single character, black and white, single character color, single 2 to 3 characters, black and white, 2 or 3 characters color, that kind of thing. And then I have them write their email, their text messaging, so I can say your commission's ready. And then I give them a brief description. And one of the caveats that I do is I say, look, know the artist that you're requesting this commission from. Don't ask me anything skeevy. Don't ask anything like weird. I'm not Brad Geiger. I'm not going to draw that for you.
Oh, man, those are the funnest ones.
I say, no, you want to go to the next table over. That's Brad Geiger. He'll be happy to draw that. Oh, it involves a wombat. Yes, Brad will definitely incorporate that into the drawing. Yes.
Yeah, you're talking to the right. Yeah, bring him right over to me. I'll handle that.
Brad's like, you're literally rubbing your hands like, ooh, another wombat commission. This is great.
Licking my chops.
Yeah, exactly. And sir, how much peanut butter does the wombat have? Okay, great. So anyway, because you have to set your limits, and to the question asker's point, they had asked, do we do commission characters from other IP, that sort of thing. I tend not to, unless it's really fun and creative, and this is what I mean. Sometimes people will say like, hey, I would like you to draw my dog Bowser, but draw him in the as though he has a dog Iron Man outfit. And to me, that's enough of a creative step away from the IP where I can make it fun, where I'm not just drawing Iron Man, that kind of thing. I have done once or twice, but I'm like, you're commissioning me as a cartoonist, so have me draw my stuff. That's more fun, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
That's my generalized attitude.
Yeah.
But now I've been talking too long, Brad. I want to hear about you because you are a much more established and I feel like have it more keyed down or keyed up rather, commission artist. So tell me how you handle it. How do you do it?
Well, very much the same, although I came to it a little bit different way. Very similar to original art. I was offering original art, and it was not selling particularly well. And I made it into a Patreon reward, and now it's a huge driver of Patreon pledges, which really seemed anti-logical to me. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll do the same thing for commissions. And I set up a level at which you get a commission at a certain amount. And it was a tremendous driver. In fact, I had to cap it off or else there was no way I was going to keep up. And I much the same way as you, I had a pre-written kind of guideline. So when you first sign up at this level, that says, okay, you're at this level. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're not gonna do. All right, and always in a commission, even though I have we were joking around about it, but it's absolutely true. I have much more broad level of the topics that I will accept than Dave does. But I still put a little caveat in there, and I say I reserve the right to politely decline any idea, anything that I'm not comfortable with. It's no harm, no foul. But it's just like, nah, I put that right up front so they know that that's a part of the deal. It's not a big deal. It's just that, nah, I don't want to do that. That's not going to happen. And I also found very early on that it's a good idea to not necessarily set limits, but to manage expectations. So I'll say in my commissions, no more than 2 figures and a simple background. In other words, if you say that you want 2 figures shaking hands in front of the Spanish Armada sailing down the fleet,
right, as Godzilla rises up from the sea, yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, no, we're not going to do that, and we're not going to do more than 2 figures. Sometimes it's like they want a whole group scene. It's like, nah, I can't do that because literally it'll be the only thing I'm working on this entire month. So manage expectations. And then what I found for my commissions is very helpful is to keep the patron involved along the way. So they will send me a write-up of what they'd like. I'll send them back at that point any adjustments that I think need to be made. Like, okay, we got to scale this back a little bit. This is a little unreasonable. Once I go from that, then I come up with a scene in my mind and I'll sketch it out. I send them a screenshot of the sketch and I say, okay, this is a scene I've got in mind. What do you think? Once they approve that, then I go on to the inks. And then at that point, changes become a little harder to make, not because I'm actually working in ink. I'm working digitally and changes are relatively easy to make. But it's harder for you to convince me once you've seen the sketch, which is usually pretty tight. You can't say, well, wait a minute, I want the sword to be in his left hand and not his right hand. Well, the sketch you approved had it in his right hand. We're going to go with the right hand. We're not going to make these kind of changes. Right. Anything you see in the sketch, you're going to see in the inks.
Wait, Brad, can I pause you? So you do go out for clarification and approval at a pencil level, though, huh?
Yep. It saves tons of time.
Yeah, that I will be honest that I don't do that. So keep going, but I want to circle back around on that about why I don't do that. But that's fascinating and interesting and a worthwhile note that you do it. That's good.
And to be honest, I have usually very, very little changes at the sketch stage because we've discussed it already. But frankly, if they do want to make a change at that point, and if it's a change that I'm willing to accept, in other words, if it's not like ridiculous, then there's no skin off my nose. I haven't started on final art, and it's really easy to make the change. So then at that point, I move on to inks. And from that point on, I send them a screenshot of the inks, but as of now, it's a formality. Here's the inks. This is what it's going to look like. I'm going to send it to Alex Heberling to color it, and she's going to make it look beautiful. And I give them a look at the colors before I post it. And by the way, I use this as a double-edged sword for me. Not only are the commissions something that I use to drive pledges, but of course, I end up posting that content on my Patreon for everyone else to see. So I'm also using it as content. And once I post it there, they've already gotten their version. I'll send them Dropbox links to high-res and low-res versions. They can print it out. They can do whatever they want from it. It's theirs at that point. And I move on. But if I were to give you any 2 words of advice when it comes to commissions, those words are manage expectations. And don't get talked into doing something you don't want to do. I don't do caricatures because I don't do them well. I've not devoted the hours and hours of practice that you need to devote to become a good caricature artist. I don't do caricatures. And I'll take a quick little detour here. I try not to do licensed characters, not because I have a problem with it. Like, I don't mind drawing a Spider-Man, or I don't mind drawing Luke Skywalker. But the problem is it limits my ability to monetize that image past the commission. And I end up taking these illustrations and I'll put them into art books or collections, or use them in graphic novels as interstitial pages. I'll use them for any one of about a dozen different uses. I want to be able to use that image further. And if I do licensed characters, it makes it that much difficult to do. So I put the hold up sign when somebody wants a licensed character, and I tell them why. It's just something that creates problems for me licensing wise down the road that I don't want to deal with, and I'd much rather be doing my own characters anyway. And again, that I think if you manage expectations up front, you have a much easier time all the way through. Don't you think, Dave?
I super agree with the phrase managed expectations. And it's interesting how that can be different for different artists. And that's worthwhile because it might be different for you as an artist too. So I am different from Brad in that the expectation that I manage is that when you hire me, which is kind of what you're doing, to draw a piece of art, you're giving me the prompt, you're giving me the suggestion, you're giving me the conditions that you'd like the art to appear. But then my spoken and unspoken agreement with you is that I am the artist. I am creating it. So for that reason, I don't give people notes, Brad, or the chance to give notes or give feedback at the pencil stage. I'm like, here's your finished art. That's done. This is it. That's done. Now here is your done and finished art that can't be changed because it's in ink. And again, this is Dave curmudgeonly probably, but one of the reasons why I do it that way is I think in last week I told you how I hate getting notes, Brad. I literally turned down gigantic jobs because I just don't like getting notes. So I hate getting commission notes. Like if you're paying me a couple $100 to draw something, whatever it is, you are paying for my expertise. You're paying for my insight. You're paying for my lookout on the world, right? It's not necessarily a collaboration. And if what you're looking for is a collaboration, then that's a different process than hiring Dave Kellett, So that's again a personal subjective thing. I understand and I respect to 1,000% why Brad does it that way because he doesn't want to have to go back and do it again. And I get that. But my attitude is, you hired me, that's what you get. You're going to get my best. I am going to give you my best. Now, whether you like it or not is a different question. But if you like me enough that you wanted to pay me, I'm assuming you're going to like the general 99.9% of the stuff that I produce. So here's your finished art, that kind of thing.
Right. And I would add that it's all in how you present it. In other words, you can do an awful lot of mitigating of this kind of armchair art directing by just the way you present that email. In other words, if I send my email out and I say, here's the sketch, do you see any changes you want to make? What do you think about it? And if I ask a bunch of questions, then I'm going to get a bunch of answers because let's face it, don't ask questions if you don't want answers.
Right.
However, if I send that sketch out and I say, here's the sketch, and just say, here's the sketch, The only time somebody's going to bring something up is if it's really bothering them.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I respect
Otherwise,
that angle.
yeah, and that's again a big part of it presenting that, and you're kind of in a dance with this other person in doing a commission, and I think it's your job as the artist to lead in that dance, not to follow. You need to lead,
Right.
and if you follow, you pretty much get what you're aiming for. You're going to follow, and if you set that situation up, then you're going to go wherever they go. That's what following is all about. So if you're going to do these commissions, by all means, be prepared to lead the dance, manage expectations, and I would add one third one, and that is to have a pre-designed list of prices, especially if you do different types of commissions, and make those available up front. In fact, I see this on Twitter all the time. They'll charge this much for a head and shoulders shot. They'll charge this much for a full body shot, this much for two bodies, this much for black and white, this much for color. It's really helpful to give somebody, if you're willing to do that range of stuff, it's helpful to give them a price sheet so that they can make the best decision with their money.
Exactly.
That's going to create somebody that's going to come back time after time. And I've got people I've been doing commissions with now for literally years. And part of that is because I think they appreciate the process. They like what they get at the end. Otherwise, they wouldn't spend their money.
Yeah, I try to make to finish that point that you started so excellently. I try to make it like a Denny's menu where you literally see what you'll get for $200. You'll see what you get for $300, that kind of thing. So I do samples of like, here's what I did for someone else at that level. Here's what I did for this person or that person. Because to Brad's point, it makes it easier for them. Like, oh, I see. Yes, I would like that kind of a thing. Or, that's a little bit more than I want to spend, but thank you for showing me that. I want to do the lesser level. And when you show them an example, it's all to the better. But I also want to say one other thing on prices is that Brad makes excellent use of reusing the art as either in art book back material or that kind of stuff, right? And I have again the greatest respect for Brad for being able to do that. There's a lot of times with my commissions where I can't make use of that in the back of a, say, Sheldon book or the back of a Drive book. But what you have to do, and keep this in mind, is Brad's pricing, I'm sure, keeps in account, hey, can I use this somewhere else? My pricing very often keeps into account, hey, I know that I cannot use this somewhere else. So you're paying for my time that otherwise could have been producing art that could make me X amount of money, And so that's basically what you're charging for. And also in terms of humility, when you're starting out commissions, maybe start from a humbler spot and work your way up. Like every year you can raise it $25 or $50 or whatever, but start from a humbler spot to build up your commissions and to build up the reputation of like, oh no, so-and-so produces great commissions, that kind of a thing. But anyway, I think we've put that one to bed. Brad, what do you think?
I think you've buttoned that up nicely.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we'll tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
Oh, when you do, you'll get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, no worries.
You can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Leave us a 5-star and a few kind words.
That, and along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, let's talk comics.
Dave, I got to tell you, this show is once again being sponsored by our good friends at Wacom, and they're going to be our sponsor through the end of the year. And I couldn't be more not only happy, but I'm going to be honest with you, prouder of that fact. As you know, both Dave and I have Wacoms in our studio. Dave always points out that I've got a Wacom sitting on my desk, and he's got two of them over there on his desks. And you always point out that you've got one more than I do. Did you ever notice that?
Brad, it's not a contest, but it's actually 3. I have 3 Wacoms in my studio. It's not a contest, though, Brad.
But no, I got to say, it feels good to have Wacom as a sponsor because obviously we both use their stuff. We endorse it strongly. We couldn't recommend it any more strongly than we already do. And it just, I'm looking down at the Wacom on my desk right now, and I'm feeling the Wacom love. So it just feels good to be brought to you once again by our friends at Wacom. And Dave, I think you've got another question from our Patreon backer.
I do indeed have a question for you, Brad. This comes in from Angela, who writes, "Hello, Brad and Dave." I almost said hello wrong. Good job, Tired Dave. So Angela says, "I work at a library, and I've been listening to Graphic Novel TK." That's another podcast, by the way, that I heartily recommend. Delightful and really informative.
Yes.
Anyway, Angela says, "Both places talk about how reviews help determine if a book will be bought by a library or a store. This can be reviews from places like Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, smaller reviewers, or the comments left on Amazon and Goodreads. Do you suggest to your readers to leave reviews? Do you send out books for review? You guys are great at tracking stats, so have you noticed whether it makes a difference? If you don't send out reviews, why?" Brad, Angela's question is fantastically good.
Yeah.
Do you want to tackle that about reviews in general and ratings on Kirkus and Publisher Weekly, and on how you handle reviews and ARC copies and that sort of thing? Brad Geiger, go.
Yeah, this is all about a question of knowing what business you're in. And my business is not quite so much bookstores and libraries, although I certainly don't turn down those sales. And I'm a big fan whenever somebody from a library makes a purchase, because I do support that 110%. The fact of the matter is, most of my business, not only for Evil Inc. After Dark, but for the mainstream Evil Inc. series as well, most of my sales come from Amazon. And also directly through Kickstarter and direct through sales on my site. But in terms of the sales that I don't have a direct hand in, it's Amazon. So I am not spending any time sending out copies for review. I don't care if Publishers Weekly ever sees it. I experimented with Goodreads for about a month and got no traction there. Although I know it's a fantastic community and I love what I see happening there. It just wasn't happening for me. The only part of this that I participate in is the part that I've actually seen traction and I've seen positive things happen from it. And that is, I will encourage my Patreon backers and my Kickstarter backers, once they get their book, to, by all means, especially the Patreon backers who may have bought it through Amazon in the first place, to sign in with their Amazon account and to leave a user-verified review of the book. That I've seen having very good results. That has worth to me. The rest doesn't have a whole lot of worth, at least for my business, the way it's set up. But Amazon, absolutely. Every now and again, I'll put a little reminder, especially to my Patreon backers, because they're the most fervent backers. They're the elite of in terms of the Evil Inc. fandom.
Right.
They're the people that are most charged up. They're the people that are most likely to respond. And so every now and again, every maybe 4 or 5 months, I'll say, by the way, if you've bought any of my books through Amazon, please sign in and leave a review. You're doing me a huge favor. And frankly, for the After Dark book, that's what it really took to get that book up and get noticed by Amazon's algorithms. Because, of course, with a book with adult content, people are not running right out to Amazon to put their name on a review. Right. That was something that was not top of mind. As soon as I mentioned it to my backers, though, I got 4 or 5 reviews within a month of people who were like, "Oh, yeah, that's going to help. By all means, I'll do it." because I'm telling you, that's the kind of Patreon backers I've got. They're the greatest, right? So that was, and then after that, I in my category, I would get in the top 10 after that very easily. Once sales started picking up, it would go up to the top 10 in its category, and of course, then that kicked out a bunch of more sales. So I try to make a note of that to do every 4 or 5 months, just because it has such an impact on sales. The rest of what she's talking about there doesn't really enter into my sphere. What about you, Dave?
Well, Brad, from time to time, you use a phrase that literally makes my heart go a titter because I'm like, that's exactly what I would have said. Oh, that's exactly what I would have said. And when you first answered this question, you said, know what business you're in.
Yeah.
And literally, that was my exact phrase that I was going to answer this question with. And rather than getting mad of like, oh, Brad stole my answer, I was like, Brad used the exact phrase I was going to use. Oh, what a dreamboat. So anyway, Brad, this wedding ring comes right off. Brad Geiger. Anyway, you got to know what business you're in, and I want to emphasize on this because it is critical to how important reviews are or are not in your business as an author. So Brad made a 1,000 good points following this, but I really want to drill down on know what business you're in. So someone who is working in traditional mass publishing, reviews are critical because you are trying to get out to tens of millions so that 1 million or so will see the review, of which 100,000 or 10,000 might be influenced by the review, so that 1,000 buy that review, right? And you want that process repeated over a couple dozen times to increase your sales by 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 over a couple different reviews, right?
And also, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, and I don't want to derail you, but there's also a matter of time involved. Your book comes out, it's got to be bought at that time. It's got to have book sales, so it gets up in the bookstores.
Yes, you have a window, Brad. I think that's what you're trying to say. You have a window to get to it. Yeah. Again, dreamboat reaction over here. So no, I'm loving everything Brad's throwing down. So yes, you have a limited time window. You also have the limited attention and focus of your publisher and marketing team, right? Like you have X amount of time to get this thing moving, or else they're moving on, right? They're like, "What? Another book coming out? See you later, Brad Geiger." Yeah, we got 4 more books we're working on now. You had your chance and you blew it. So you've got to get reviews, and you've got to get those Publishers Weekly write-ups and those Kirkus stars, because if you don't, you very quickly get washed out by the next 1,000 books that are coming out in that system, right? Whereas what Brad and I do, and the lifestyle, frankly, that we propose, which I find more satisfying, is a direct author-to-audience interaction. And so what does that mean? That means I've already built my audience. I'm not trying to reach out to anyone new necessarily. I already built my audience. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to sell to a percentage of them. 1%, 2%, 5%, maybe ideally of my readership is going to buy a book, right? Now, that also means that I keep the lion's share of the profits. On a $50 drive hardcover, we don't need to go into super brass tacks on the numbers, but let's just say Papa keeps the lion's share of that number, right?
I was holding my breath. I'm like, is he really going to, we going to get into numbers here?
I mean, I don't necessarily mind, but anyway, but compare that to a traditionally mass distributed author who, we can grab a bunch of different numbers, but let's just say they'll get $1 out of a $15 to $20 book, right?
Yes.
And so because a lot of masters have to be paid there. The bookstore has to make their money. The distributor has to make their money. The publisher has to make their money. The agent has to make their money. If there is a lawyer at 5%, they have to make their money. If there's an international agent, they have to make their money, right? All these different people, a publicist, they have to make their money if they're separately hired. So you're ending up with $1 on an average book. Even a New York Times bestseller, you're getting $1 out of that book. So what that means is, because I just did the math in my head right now, if you're selling 150,000 copies of a book, Brad, you as an author are making as much as I make when I sell 3,000 copies of Drive.
Wow.
So I don't need to make reviews and start things. I don't need to do all that because I'm not trying to reach 150,000 people.
Right.
I'm just trying to reach, of the tens of thousands of Drive readers, I'm trying to convince 3,000 to jump in on the book, you know?
Yep.
And so it's a very different business model once you look at it that way, and you realize, oh no, Dave. I mean, like, listen, like Brad, I'm never going to look a review in the mouth, right? It's gonna.
Right.
That was a terrible mixed metaphor with looking a gift horse in the mouth.
I'm never going to look a review in the
I'm
mouth.
never going to look a review in the mouth. That's a weird. That came out really weird. Anyway, I'm never going to look askance at a review. I'm never going to turn down a 5-star Kirkus whatever thing. But it's not. It's never going to happen because I don't have a publicist and a publisher behind me, like getting it in front of that Kirkus reviewer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's never going to happen. And also, the review itself, while lovely, while super helpful, doesn't really move the needle on how many books I sell because I'm selling, again, to an audience that I've already built, that I can already reach. It's direct artist to audience. And so I'm just tapping into that pre-existing audience to sell a book. Brad, am I wrong here?
You're right and wrong. Everything you said is right. Up until not looking a review in the mouth, I will look a review in the mouth. When's the last time somebody reviewed your stuff and got it right? What's the last time somebody took a look?
I can tell you one because I still use the quote on my books. There was a newspaper in New York that had this amazing quote that said, "Drive, the characters are the story is serious, the characters are hilarious." And I was like, "Oh, A, that's a great synopsis, and B, I'm using that on all my publishing materials because I love that quote."
But how was the rest of the story? I mean, did they get
the rest of the review was fine.
Okay. I guess my point is every time I've been reviewed, it's like, okay, this isn't quite right. They're getting this wrong. You know, I've never had a review that I thought, they did a really good job of summing up my work.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, it's usually like Brad Geiger, who draws animal comics. No, I don't. who lives in New York. Nope, don't live in New York. He's childless. Nope, I've got kids. You know, like none of the facts are ever right. The story is always mangled.
Or worse yet, the review starts with crash, bang, zoom. Holy comic books! Brad Geiger's drawing people in capes.
Exactly.
I'm done.
Even with Raina selling 18 million copies of books, she still gets reviews like "Bang Zoom! Comics aren't just for kids anymore." And you're like,
God.
Drive off a cliff already. That same headline was used in 1980.
Yeah, but yeah, you're for the most part, you're absolutely right. It's not a thing to turn down, but I don't put any brain space towards it. I don't spend any time wondering if I'm getting reviewed or what. I've exposed my ignorance plenty of times on this show. I'll just expose it one more time. I had no idea what Kirkus is. You could have told me Kirkus was a breakfast cookie, and I would have said, "Okay, give me some with my coffee." I don't know what Kirkus is.
Brad, it's a breakfast cookie.
Good. If it comes in vanilla, I'll take 2.
Well, here's the dirty little secret, Brad. Aside from, let's say, I'm going to be generous and say, aside from a dozen cartoonists that work in traditionally publishing, aside from those dozen for whom I am personally jealous of their careers, aside from those dozen, everyone else is looking at the numbers that we make doing it the way we do and going, "Oh, that's a really good system. I like the way you do it." But don't get me wrong, I would kill for Raina's career. She is literally the best cartoonist of our generation in terms of impact, and she's selling 18 million copies. That's amazing. So I'm incredibly jealous and delighted by her career. But aside from maybe a dozen cartoonists, everyone else is like, so it turns out I don't make a lot of money from publishing. And turns out I am going to need that job back at Target, so if I can get that, if you could pass me that clipboard back, I'll go back to stocking.
I've gotten a couple of those emails too. So listen, Brad, run through this once more. Tell me how you're doing this again.
Yeah, we do get that email from time to time. So my book just came out 7 months ago, and it didn't have the splash that I was hoping for. Hey, and I was wondering if you guys could take me through your business model and let me know how you're doing it, because it's a little bit tricky over here.
Sorry about that. I just gave blood, and it's going to take me a while before I can make the keyboard work again. So now that we've insulted a whole bunch of people, we've got time, Dave, I think, for another $5 Patreon
well, no, you know
question.
what? Because the piss and vinegar is up in me now, and I want to finish this thought.
Good.
Is that the thing with traditional publishing is that it's aside from books for kids, it's really hard to make a career in traditional publishing comics right now.
You're absolutely right.
The market is just it's just tricky. It's just tricky. Like even people with hugely successful books at either Marvel or DC or Image that I know, or even with Scholastic that are mid-tier to low-tier successes, they're like, it's just not as much money as I thought it was going to be. And so, it's hard for everybody. It's hard for Brad and I. Like we're joking about it now, but 6 to 12 months from now, we could be running scared as well. So it's like the whole idea with reviews is that it's a part of a system that for us, it just doesn't seem to make sense for the vast majority of artists. Don't you think, Brad? Isn't that the best way to say it? Like, it just doesn't work for the vast majority of people.
Well, it's wasted energy, too. I would take that energy that somebody else might be spending trying to get reviews and sending out free copies of their book and all this other stuff. I'd much rather be spending that energy on social media, reaching people directly. I'd rather be spending that energy on Patreon. I'd rather be spending that energy setting up my next Kickstarter. There's lots of things to do. Reviews fall so far down the list that they fall off because I'd rather use that energy on things that work.
I kind of feel about reviews the way I feel about book signings. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, that it's a lot. What's that German phrase, Sturm und Drang? It's like, it just feels like a lot of Sturm und Drang. There's a lot of motion, a lot of movement, a lot of but then nothing really comes of it. You know, it's like you've stirred up a big whirlpool of motion and no books got sold. You know, that kind of thing.
I could only dream for Sturm und Drang. My book, the one time I set up a book signing, they set me up a table at the comic shop. I brought copies of my book. This was almost 15 years ago. Set up copies of my book. I wore my best shoes, got out there and watched.
Best shoes. Sorry, that's the detail that got me. Wore my best shoes. I'm putting on clean underwear today. No normal Brad Geiger for me.
I sat at the table and watched tumbleweeds blow across my table for 3 hours as the guy who owned the comic shop came up and said, "Funny, it's usually busy on Saturdays."
That's weird. People are walking in and turning right back around again. Well, all right, let's move on to the next question, and I'll read it out to you, Brad. This comes in from our reader over at patreon.com/ComicLab, Jay Lark, and he says, "Hey, Brad and Dave, special sales and discounts on books and merch are very common, especially around holidays. However, here's the question. Does discounting an item disincentivize customers from paying full price for an item in the future because they've learned that if they wait long enough, the price might come down, particularly at times when making the purchase sooner rather than later is crucial, such as a Kickstarter campaign? Thanks as always for the insightful and entertaining show. Brad Geiger, sale prices and discounts on books and merch. How do you handle it? What do you advise?"
I think it's all a question of timing. In other words, if you run a sale at the end of every month, then yes, you're going to train people to realize that there's a sale at the end of every month, and they're going to wait off and buy the thing when the price comes down. If you run a sale once a year around Christmas time, I don't think it's going to affect a whole lot of stuff because that's a once a year thing. Again, this comes back to a matter of perspective. I think sometimes as creators, we think that our backers and our followers are watching every little thing we do. To an extent that puts us much more important in their minds than we actually are. I think there's a lot that we do, and all you got to do is run a Kickstarter for a month and then get that email from a backer on the 31st day saying, "Oh, I didn't know you were doing a Kickstarter," to find out that they're not paying attention to every little thing we do. They're not even paying attention to the big things we do for 30 days.
Right.
So I don't think you gotta worry quite so much about.
Hey, you just hit puberty there for a second. Did you hear that?
I did.
So I don't think you.
Turned into Andy Devine there for a minute. No, I don't. I don't think you got to worry so much. If you do a sale like a summer sale and a Christmas sale, you are not going to affect your Kickstarter that comes out when people say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to do this Kickstarter in August because all I got to do is wait until December." No. Don't overthink this. As long as you're not doing sales super regularly, you're going to be just fine. And if you think you need to do a sale or again, don't discount, if you pardon the choice of words, the idea of doing a loss leader, taking some old merchandise and making it super discounted as a way to get people coming to the store with the expectation that they're going to buy a little something extra as well. I'm a big fan of the loss leader, but don't overthink this. It's not quite as big of a deal as you're making it. You can do a Christmas time sale, a holiday time sale, or a summer sale and be just fine. What do you think, Dave?
No, I think you've hit it right on the head, and I think the way you said it perfectly, which is that people are not micro-tracking what you're doing. So, for example, you know that site, Brad? I don't know if you've ever seen it, camel.com, that tracks Amazon prices.
No, I've never heard. I thought you'd making that up.
No, it's
like spelled like the animal, camel.
Yeah, 3 times, camel.com. What you can do is you can type in any product on Amazon, and you can see how they've priced it over their history, and you can see whether it's coming down, whether you're currently in a price spike, that kind of thing. Well, I'm sorry that I brought up something that you weren't, because that kind of ruins the point. But what I was saying is, it's not like people are tracking our websites like they would be tracking Amazon on camel. You know what I mean? Like no one's going, well, Brad Geiger on the 1st of last year raised prices by 2%, but then on the 15th dropped the prices of the Evil Ink book. Like no one is doing that. They're going, you know what? I'd like an Evil Ink book. Oh, it's on sale. All the better. You know, that kind of thing.
Done. Yeah.
Done. And so to Brad's point, what I like to do is I do like to introduce a little bit of varieties in my sales so that someone doesn't assume, well, Dave always puts Act 1 of Drive on sale on the 1st of December. So I'm just going to wait. I was going to get it, but I'm just going to wait. What I try to do is anytime there's a sale, it's a different permutation of one of my books. Maybe it's Sheldon Book 5. Maybe it's the stickers. Maybe it's a poster. Maybe it's a pin, you know, that kind of thing. So that you never really know what I'm doing. And I guess the better way to say it is you can't anticipate what's going to go on sale. So if you want something, you might as well go ahead and get it. But the one thing that I do, and this is a separate but related thing, Brad, since I still do conventions, I should relatedly say that the one thing I don't do is I don't put books on discount or sale on the Sunday afternoon of a Comic-Con, which a lot of cartoonists do.
Oh, I don't like that practice at all. Yeah.
Because you are definitely training your audience. And they're already being trained by Hyperion and Scholastic and Disney, all the book publishers around you that put their books on sale because they're just staff. They don't want to carry it home. So they're like, yeah, sure, fine. 40% is the price today. We're trying to get rid of it. Whereas I, as an individual artist who doesn't need mass sales, I'm not a Scholastic. I need direct artist to author or author to audience sales. So I don't discount on Sundays. I keep it same price so that if someone comes up on a Sunday afternoon, they get it the same price as if they had bought it on Friday, and they know that my support is consistent and it's the same basis any day of a show. Because otherwise, oh boy, are you training folks into a bad habit if you go discounting on Sunday?
Forget about training. That doesn't even enter into it. It's another case of know the business you're in. Okay, there's a big difference between you and Hyperion, and this is what it is. You are relying on that connection you're making with a reader when they come to the booth, when you sell them a book, and so on and so forth. Hyperion doesn't give two shnikes about that. They're there to move. Well, I didn't want to be obscene. They don't care. But they're there to move merchandise, and if they put it out at a 40% discount, they're still making a profit on that book and cutting, like Dave mentioned, their sales. But they are not worried about making a relationship with the person that's coming up to their booth. They're looking to move merchandise. Dave's looking to make a relationship with the people that are coming up with them. Now, if somebody comes up on a Saturday, again, like I said, it's got nothing to do with training. Somebody comes up on a Saturday and buys a book, and they're circling back on Sunday, and they see that Dave's selling that same book for 50% off. that relationship for the Saturday person just got tarnished a little bit.
Yeah,
and
you're right.
they're going to feel cheated, and rightly so, by the way. But they're going to feel cheated. They're going to feel disappointment, even if they totally get it. Even if they are a convention veteran and they know the score, they're still going to feel a little bit cheated.
Yep.
And Dave's business and my business is all about making that person feel good about themselves for aligning themselves with us. And we can't risk that happening. We want that person to leave saying that meeting Dave Kellett was one of the nicest things that happened all weekend. Hyperion, that doesn't, and I'm just picking on Hyperion because they were the first persons. I'm not saying that they're bad. They're like everybody else. They've got their business that they're doing. And they would be making mistakes if they tried to do their business the way we do business because they know what business they're in.
Right.
And that's why I say it's got nothing to do with training people. It's got everything to do with know the business you're in.
Yep. Well, on that point, Brad, I think you've put the perfect button on it. So I'm going to say, let's go on to our last question for the show. And this is about T-shirt theft and in general theft on the internet. So, Brad, this comes in from Mark Ashworth over on patreon.com/ComicLab and says, Brad and Dave, I keep seeing warnings that I should be checking to be sure no one is making a T-shirt or a bumper sticker or something from my work without my knowledge. But that sounds like an unwinnable me versus the internet situation. My question is, how would you check to be sure no one else in the world is using your stuff?
Good Lord. I've got too much to do without worrying about if somebody somewhere is doing something I don't approve of. This question is kind of the same question as we get when people say, I want to start my webcomic, but I'm scared somebody's going to steal it, or I'm scared somebody's going to steal the copyright. You can get an awful lot of paralysis being worried that something bad is going to happen to the extent that it keeps you from doing the thing that you want to do because you're so scared. You're so terrified that something's going to happen. Meanwhile, speaking only for myself, I can tell you that over a 20-year career, 80% of it was doing work that absolutely nobody would want to steal to do anything.
Right.
Nobody was looking for my freaking Greystone Inn comics to make bumper stickers out of. Nobody was looking at the first year of Evil Inc. trying to make a T-shirt. Nobody was interested. My work wasn't good enough for that. And so much of, especially I really, and I'm not saying anything about the quality of anybody's work, but I'm saying, especially if you're starting out, if this is where your head is at, you got to realize you're just starting out. You're probably not doing work that anybody's even interested in stealing. But let's say you are. Let's say you're doing gorgeous work. You're just sparkling up the place. Here's the deal. Somebody somewhere is probably stealing your stuff, and they're probably making $1.298 out of it. And go with God, do what you're going to do. It's not going to even come on your radar until it raises to the level of being significant, and at which point they're making significant money. At that point, you need to get involved, and you need to become active and send out cease and desist, and so on and so forth. That's and by the way, that's fine. All they really did was showed you that there's a merchandise model that you should have been thinking of if you haven't been doing it already,
right.
And maybe you ought to be going in that direction and pursuing that. Getting your nose out of joint because they made a few bucks, it's disappointing. And when it's your art, it's grating, and I totally get that, but letting that derail you from getting your work done and getting doing the positive things in your life and building your career. I think the amount of time that people spend worrying about this topic is counterproductive.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, Brad is a far better artist than I am because he said 80% of the stuff that he's produced never could be made into merch. I'm going to one-up him and say 99.999% of the stuff that I've produced over 20 years of cartooning could not be merchandised in any way that could make someone more than $1. I've tried. Right. Let me tell you, I've tried. If I can't do it, they're not going to do anything with it. So I've had a couple of, Brad, and I'm sure you have too, puns or one-liners or jokes or something where someone could lift the text out of my comic, put it onto a shirt, and I've seen it on Redbubble or 9gag or whatever the hell it is. Sorry, I got angry there for a second. I just hate Redbubble. But anyway, they put it on Redbubble, and like Brad, I'm like, go with God. Good luck trying to sell your Helvetica font version of my joke. I can't even sell more than a few hundred versions of that on my site to an audience that knows the joke.
Right.
So good luck with that.
Right.
So I actually heartily endorse and co-sign on what Brad said. Do they exist? 1,000% they exist. Are they making money on it? Yes, they are.
Yep.
Are they making a ton of money? No, they're not. Is it money that you could have made or could now somehow tap into? Probably not. So, and again, I have thousands of comics up on the internet, and 99% of them don't make me money. So, but I think Brad hit on it, which is, a lot of people take this as a moment of fear that keeps them from creating. And it's very similar, Brad, when you say to the people that email us saying, Brad, how do I copyright my work before it goes online? I'm really worried about copywriting my work because I don't want to share it because somebody's going to steal it. And it's like, listen, I can tell you, I don't know who you are, but I can tell you right now, it's probably not that good of an idea. Just put it out there anyway and get started, right? Yeah. And even if it is a good idea, you still have rights within the U.S. system at the point of creation. I guess what I'm saying is don't let fear stop you from being a creative person first and foremost. And when you're worried mainly about like, oh no, someone's going to steal it, someone's going to put it on a t-shirt, someone's going to take my copyright, that keeps you from creating the thing in the first place. Now listen, Casey Green created, by hook or by crook, one of the most powerful...
I was just about to bring Casey up.
Casey created one of the most powerful and effective memes, probably on a lark. I haven't asked him in a long time about it, but it was probably like everything else, one strip that he did, and it was like, all right, well, that's that. I'll go on to the next strip. But it took off, right? Now, he since has had to hire lawyers and licensing folks to track down the stuff. But let me tell you, it's only because it is literally the biggest meme online right now. You know what I mean? And will be for another couple of years. Like, we're going to be seeing that as we go to our grave. Our grandkids are going to text us like, hey, how's school going? And they're going to text us a meme that says, this is fine. You know, that kind of thing. So what I'm getting at is, though, like, worry about it when you become Casey Green. Don't worry about it when you haven't picked up your pen yet. You know, that kind of thing.
And realize that what happened to Casey, although it's uncomfortable and it was nightmarish for Casey kind of won the negative lottery, right? It was like getting hit by lightning, not in that it was a fluke that he came up with such a great image. He's a very good cartoonist. That part was not a fluke. The fact that it struck the zeitgeist the way it did and took off, that's kind of like winning a bad lottery, right? I don't sit around wondering if I'm going to win a bad lottery. It's just not going to happen to me, right? And chances are it's not going to happen to you either. You've got as much chances of you creating the next "This Is Fine" as you do of winning the lottery. I think you can go forward very confidently.
Yeah, Brad, that's a really good. Yeah, you know what? Yes, Brad, you're hitting them all out of the park today. I'm sorry.
There's got to be a better phrase than that than winning the bad lottery, but you know what I mean. It's got a big chance. It's 1 out of a million chance that this is going to happen to you.
Yeah, and by the way, when it does happen, there are professionals you can hire to help make it right, to help fix it. You know, and so is it going to happen? Have I had cartoons where this happened? Yes. Have I had cartoons where I had to either hire a lawyer or do this or that to send a cease and desist? Yes. Has it happened frequently? No. I think it happened twice over the entire 20-year period of my cartooning. Was it detrimental to my work? No, not really. I was mad for an afternoon, sent the letter, and then that was done. You know, that kind of thing. So right. But keep in mind that was over 20 years of cartooning. So had I been focused on that, to Brad's earlier point, then it would have stopped me from 20 years of cartooning or slowed me or made me hesitant. Don't forget that the place of cartooning that you want to operate from is joy. The moment of creation is joy, and it's optimism and it's excitement and it's a willingness to share. And when you shut that down, you a little bit shut down the creativity that makes that all possible.
Yeah, it would be like, to bring that metaphor home, it would be like buying a lottery ticket and then on the way home buying a brand new Lexus and stopping and buying a newly flipped house from a guy with a Sharpie marker in his hand and stopping along the way and, you know, buying a helicopter. And when all these bills come in, you say, well, that's okay because I bought this lottery ticket. You know, it's the exact same thing, you know, in reverse. It's not going to happen. So don't worry about buying those Lexuses and buying those flipped houses. Your lottery ticket is probably not going to come through tonight.
Right. And then go back to what originally got you to sit down at the drawing table, which is I want to create, I want to share, I want to have fun cartooning. As is so many things with our career, don't operate from a place of fear, operate from a place of optimism and hope and sharing and creativity. And that will serve you far better in your career.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And don't forget the Sharpie markers, because then you can say you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics in Sharpie.
Your hosts have been the fantastic house flipper Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And Dave, I'm not going to look it in the mouth, kill it, co-director of Stripped. And the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
That made it sound like one of those pretty lady type things where you're like, I'm not kissing you. That's what it is, Dave. I'm not kissing you. Well, the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton, fantastic musician that I highly recommend over at theworldrecord.net. And this episode and all episodes was edited by the delightful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media. And today's sponsor, as in all the rest of the sponsors for 2019, the good folks at Wacom over at wacom.com, wacom.com.
And ComicLab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/ComicLab. So we're going to go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/ComicLab.
Okay, so Brad, I would like to commission you for some artwork.
Yes. Go ahead.
So how much for a single Captain Heroic? How much would that? Well, don't even mention prices right now. So here's what I want. There is the wombat needs to be sexy. It needs to be in a bikini. Captain Heroic walks into the bar, sees the sexy wombat in the bikini. Okay, now hold on. I brought some props I would like you to include into this commission piece. So here we go. I need this 1986 Lexus how-to manual. This is how to drive your Lexus. This is important for reasons I won't go into. I need you to include this very large ballpoint pen. I need you to include this baseball hat, this very specific baseball hat. Are you comfortable with this drawing so far, Brad? Are we still on the same page?
It depends on where you want me to put the pen.